Not exactly hidden. The powder ignites and sends the lead covered in copper down the barrel with spirals carved into it. The bullet spins even as it's carved and erupts from the weapon, followed by a brief flash of fire. The blast is only just a hair slower than the sound of its coming. It screams through the air and towards its target, only for sharpened metal reinforced by axiom to intercept. The spin of the bullet works against it even as it's cut, and the two halves spin to the sides, missing the man holding the blade entirely. With a whisper in the woods, the gunman relocates entirely. The angle is wildly different, and he aims at the back of the swordsman's head. His shot is good, and on an unaware and unprepared target, this would be death itself for his target. But the man is neither unaware nor unprepared. The bullet is deflected rather than bisected, and his blade goes back into his sheath again. "You boys are having far too much fun with your training," Morg Arkin states in a tone that does little to hide his amusement. "Can't hear you over how awesome I am," Koga jokes, and the other man scoffs at the childish answer. "By the way, why are you collecting so many seeds, cuttings, and spores? Are you trying to make a new copse for the Dark Forest?" "Something like that. Speaking with you, people got me thinking about a few things, and I've come to a decision." Morg's answer is cut off by another blast of precise gunfire, and Koga contorts far more than usual to not only prevent the bullet from reaching any further than the blade of his weapon, but also redirect it entirely. "You missed!" Imigar shouts down. "So did you!" Koga protests. "I've been on point every time. You've been deflecting. I didn't even have to dodge for that to whiz past me." Imigar returns. "Children with deadly toys, the both of you." Morg Arkun scolds them and rolls his eyes as the sound of Imigar blowing a raspberry echoes out from the darkness of the forest at night. Few deadlier than the woods, and actual children have that as an ally. Koga returns even as his sword fully clicks back into place after an inspection. The point stands that for fully grown and trained soldiers with blades and bullets at your disposal, you are dangerously casual and playful about it. Morg Arkun notes, "I suppose we are, but we know the risks, we know the consequences, and we accept them. What more is there to say?" Koga asks, and Morg Arkun considers before shrugging. "Very little, I suppose, so long as the consequences don't reach past you two." "They won't." Koga responds just as another gunshot goes off from yet another angle, and he contorts again and spins to better return the shot. It is then immediately sent back, and Koga splits it this time. "I didn't miss that time." "Didn't get me either," Imigar returns. "Between the two of us, you're the only one that's touched a bullet with his skin." Koga answers, "Gentlemen, you're both lethal and neither of you are blooded. Can we agree that you're both a little too powerful to actually fight without causing a lot of collateral?" Morg Arkun asks, and there's a pause before Imigar drops out of the boughs above and into a near-silent crouch. The massive rifle strapped across his back jostles merrily as he stands up with more than a bit of bounce in his step. The bleached blonde rows that lead to braids actually stand out the most due to the man's dark skin and darker clothing. It gives him a mildly surreal appearance in the dark. In another part of the forest, there is the sound of shattering stone and clashing steel. Further gunfire echoes from further out, and Morg shakes his head somewhat. The men tend to save their personal training for when the children are back home with their parents, not only for the safety of the children, but so as not to give the little ones ideas. Running with scissors is bad enough. Tag with swords is far, far worse. Not that the training methods the men are using are any better. It's the boring ones that are sniping targets from kilometers off and through thick brush without any light source. Most close quarters. Combat practice is so fast and full of so many deflections, locks, and dodges that there's only a hint that something real is happening when someone slams someone else with or into a boulder which promptly shatters. The fact that even the strongest of melee weapons are reinforced to absurd degrees and moving with enough speed that they're credible threats to most tanks, and that no one is using anything more than basic axiom enhancement and just listening to the woods when appropriate, that really hammers home tonight's exercises. When the kids come back in around breakfast tomorrow, none of them will have any idea just how much their elders train, or just how much they have to clean up in order to keep the woods pristine. The Empress wants the sorcerers of Surbo to become a more just and merciful force, rather than just screaming blood-soaked vengeance. But for justice, one needs a level head and clear vision, which the training is giving the children. Mercy, however, mercy is much more difficult to manage. To be merciful, one must be in a position to grant mercy. For that, you must be not only victorious, but restrained, not an easy combination. So the men trained, learning and creating new tricks, techniques, and know-how with every spar. The woods watched and learned with them, growing wiser as they grew stronger, a wisdom that would blossom into further strength when passed to newer and younger sorcerers. The next day would be exhausting, but well worth it. It's not like any of the men were unused to going long periods without sleep. A normal human was untiring and enduring by alien standards. An undaunted soldier, they pushed well beyond even that. Come morning, and there was little sign of even a tired eye around the village. The children showing up when they were ready and quickly finding themselves greeted with a warm breakfast that was both sweet and meaty in order to really satisfy their carnivore natures. Slightly thick broth with little scraps of tasty meats makes a fine early meal. There's a bit of groaning when the day starts with a jog through the forest. The kiddos are unaware of just how much the men had been working the previous night. Still, having the various types of trees, moss, and what uses they can have beyond controlling them to do your bidding is of use. Alara wood is actually really good for smoking and cooking meat. The stora moss has clotting and healing effects, although it's generally wise to clean a wound first. The moss being edible for omnivores and herbivores also comes up. When hunting, it's best to know where your prey is going to be. They have the routes up hills and a few climbing tricks shown to them if they decide they want to gain some height. The morning is taken up by the jog/nature hike, and they're back in the village in time for lunch. Dale's managed to down another parattack and has carved out the shotgun slug already. The children watch closely as his knife slides through and peels off the hide. Dale had learned from his earlier mistakes and has already gotten rid of the bowels and other more disturbing organs. Already small insects were making their way on the offal, offering a good distance away from the village. Of course, parattacks are axiom-born animals, so there are some organs just flat out missing. There's barely a liver and no trace of kidneys. The stomach was axiom-infused, and now that it was dead, it wasn't a sack of bile and half-digested food, but it was full of spit, chewed-up plants and fungi, as well as several larger insects and smaller animals. So the stomach needs to be cleaned out. The lining itself is incredibly healthy and makes a good bit of haggis, but it needs to be very thoroughly cleaned before it can be eaten. The guts also need cleaning in order to make proper sausages and other such treats. The bones, the fat, the hooves, the teeth, and the remaining eyeball. The mashed up and destroyed brains also has a use, as does all sorts of little things. Most people have no idea just how many parts there are to an animal, and just how useful all of them are. Meat and hide are just barely scraping the surface of the sheer bounty that is a properly slaughtered beast. And that's putting aside the many old-time medicines that don't really help anything at all, but have a powerful placebo effect. No parattack spleen for the shakes, no. But parattack spleen in a blood-pudding dish is something else entirely. He points out the little bits around the parattack, even as he carves them out. His first and most important lesson is that the sharp knife is the safest. Keep the cuts under control at all times. If you have to use any real force, then you need a sharper knife. The blade needs to glide through the meat. It doesn't take too long until the paratak is in all its pieces. Next comes the cooking. Just as important as properly butchering the meat. An Alara wood fire is hard to get going. Hardwood is a bit of a pain that way at times, but soon a good smoky fire is going and the children are helping him skewer strips of meat onto pairs of sticks. The Japanese style lets them control the meat easily and turn them over as they need to without any silliness of the meat turning against them. The day is only at the halfway point as things get grilled up, smoked, and the bones are charred, then set to simmer in a huge pot. They'll be skimming the scum off every hour in order to make a wonderful broth that will serve as the base of tonight's dinner. Then, the 3 youngest trainees are set to try and build their little cabin again. Things would be easier if they weren't required to use the bigger beams in a specific style. But this isn't about making a plywood shack or an outhouse. This is about building properly. Building with minimalism and building to last. No nails, no screws, and no glue. Pegs, hammers, saws, and chisels to carve everything the right way. Of course, they have to get a proper grip on earth control for a strong foundation. Without that, things just won't work. They're trying to and failing to fully understand just what earth and stone are. What it means for something to be a mineral as opposed to a gas or a liquid, which, to be fair, is a lot for a small child to understand. It's all like this. Koga tries some time later. He tosses the 3 a pebble. From the smallest grain of sand to the biggest asteroid, all stone is very similar. What defines it is its solidity, how little it moves. This is because it's all one piece. Water as we see it does not stick together as much, and so it flows. Air sticks together even less, and so it blows. But stone stands. A grain of sand is a stone and it stands. A mountain is a stone and it stands. But it's more than just sand and stone and boulders, Kalstarn says, and Koga nods. It is. This is where we go from stone and sand to earth. Earth has another important part. Do you know what it is? He asks, and the 3 look confused. Dirt? Mux Moro tries. It's part of dirt and stones are as well. Try again. Soil? Jeth Erla offers. That's much the same thing as dirt. Death? Kalstarn asks, and Koga gives him a curious look. Yes. I mean that when I passed judgment on those monsters, one was fed to the forest. So does that mean that one of the pieces of earth that makes it different from stone is dead things? That's silly. Mux Moro dismisses. How is it silly? Koga asks. He's right. He is? Mux Moro asks. When something dies, its body starts to break down. Tiny creatures called bacteria and bigger things like bugs will eat them. There's also the fact that the poop and other things from animals is part of Earth as well. It's kind of a funny thing about life, but it feeds on death. It's why the forest doesn't mind at all when we eat its fruit or hunt its beasts. It's one of the most normal and natural things in existence. You find everywhere there's life to be found. That's gross, Jeth Erla says, and Koga shrugs. It is what it is. Now that you 3 better understand what earth and stone are, do you think you can control it better? Koga asks, and the 3 share a look.